Welcome to Things That Matter, featuring Farm to Market, caring for kids, and age-reversing health. It's all coming right up on Things That Matter. Now, please welcome your host, Carl Krebs. Welcome to Things That Matter, featuring...
Well, good evening for November the 7th, 2 days after a historic day in the United States, as we see a shift in politics in the United States. And tonight on Things That Matter, we would be remiss in talking about how this change in the administration down south that's going to take place in January is going to affect us here in Canada. So for my guests that are going to be coming on, talking about the farm to market, Harry Siemens is going to be talking from his experience, having connected with a lot of people already to find out what is it that we should be concerned about. Do we have any real concerns at all? And in our second segment, Age Reversing Health, we have a wonderful guest, Lana, who's joining us. And she's going to be talking about it from the perspective of a health coach and operating a health business. Our third segment, you don't want to miss this one. John Euler is going to be with us. He is an esteemed, well-recognized, licensed professional counselor out of the United States. And we know there was talk. President-elect Trump spoke briefly about some of the aspects about education and about the sexualization of kids and so forth. But in his announcement of who he's going to appoint to look after that, we want to talk to John Euler and get his professional opinion on how he sees this is going to impact all of the areas that concern us when it comes to caring for kids. But let's get the show started right now with Farm to Market.
Welcome to Farm to Market, featuring an in-depth look at how the Canadian ag industry and Canadian farmers alike are faced with a variety of challenges in an ever-changing liberal Canadian agricultural landscape. Now, here's your hosts, Carl Krebs and Harry Siemens.
All right, well, welcome back. Farm to Market is here, and after a brief little holiday, Harry Siemens, my esteemed colleague of 50-plus years in ag reporting, is joining me here in studio. Harry, welcome back, and we have a really good conversation planned for tonight as we talk about the changes that are going to go, that are already underway in the United States as the administration changes from the Biden-Harris to the Trump-Vance. Harry, welcome to the show.
Yes, and you know something already that's happened that is getting people totally upset is that he's appointed his chief of staff, Susie Wiles, the co-chair of the whole campaign, and it's the first lady chief of staff in the U.S. government. And so people, here's Trump not being able to work with women. Who does he appoint his co-campaign chair? And so, you know what? That's a real good start. And in Pennsylvania, they turned over another Senate seat. David McCormick beat the incumbent of 3 terms. And that was just announced before we came on. So the reason, as we've talked a lot about this in the last day and a half, 2 days, it's not that I want to get into the politics, but at the same time, you can't help it by what has been going on and what's happening, especially with the way he won this thing, 312 electoral votes. And so agriculture plays such a major role in the economies of both Canada and the United States and around the world. And secondly, and just as important, it feeds the people. And so now we've had lots of different things. I've talked to farmers. I've talked to a couple of key people involved in agriculture. Yes, there is some concern as to the immediate results. But I talked to a young farmer up at Rivers, Manitoba. His name is Andy. And Andy said, you know what? He initially was a little quiet on this, but he says, maybe in the short term there might be a little pain. But for my business as a farmer, it's going to be just fine.
Well, we have to recognize and face our fears no matter where we find them, Harry. So we know that the acronym of fear is false expectations appearing real. So when Trump announces that he's going to make America great again, which was the slogan from 2016 that won him the White House back then, and all levels of all branches of the government, the follow-up was supposed to be to keep America great again. But in 4 years that followed, when he lost in 2020, however you view those elections, we're not here to debate that. But we've had 4 years where America now has regressed. Its economy is in trouble. Cost of living is out of control. It's importing more oil, while at the time a while ago it was self-sufficient. So there's some rebuilding to do here. But when he talks about make America great again, is it possibly to the detriment of other countries who, as he often says, don't pay their fair share or take advantage of America? What's the feeling amongst the producers in doing business with America going forward with the Trump administration?
Well, that's exactly. Gunder Yokum, who's the president of the Wheat Growers, we used to call them of Western Canada, now it's the Wheat Growers Association, and he farms up at Ely, Manitoba. And the interesting thing about Gunther, he immigrated to the United States from Germany with his folks, and his mom and dad were farming. So he understands some of these things. So his initial reaction was, yes, we're concerned. He says, we are about free trade. But at the same time, he says, just as important, far more important about what Trump is going to do or not do is what will we do with our federal government? How will we respond to some of these things? So he says he puts on a 10% tariff. Well, you know what? You and I know it's not going to be 10% on everything coming in. It'll be negotiated. And that's really what Gunder Yokum was all about. We have this trade agreement between Mexico, United States, and Canada. And we want that free trade to keep going across the border both ways. But one of the other things that I said right off the bat when this happened, the whole aspect of protectionism. We may have tariffs and we may have those things, but the out and right protectionism that was starting to really happen as far as farm products, live pigs and live cattle and so forth, and it wasn't actually happening, but it's on the books as far as the U.S. government is concerned. So I believe that whole aspect of protectionism is going to take a different light. It's not going to be so much protectionism, but you know what? You scratch my back, I'll scratch your back, and let's keep this thing going forward.
Well, that is a great segue, Harry, because, you can fear Trump, the man who has a tenacity to pursue what he wants and finish it and complete it. He's the guy that gets things done. But there's Trump, the businessman, who has negotiated deals all his life from when he told his father, I want to build over there in Manhattan, not over here where Fred Trump was building. And he took it on and he reshaped the skyline of New York. Trump is an influencer, but he's a businessman, Harry. So in business, we know there's a book I read one time. You get what you negotiate, but you have to negotiate. So Trump, the businessman, enters the arena. And I think that's the confidence in the American people that they've got a healthy, strong negotiator to make fair deals. Fair deals work both ways, Harry, right?
Totally. And that's exactly what I've been saying. And that's what Gunder Yokum totally would understand and say is that we've got to go in both ways. And the other thing that gives me lots of confidence in that things will move forward the right way is the representation right across the United States. He's got 72 million people. He's going to pick, instead of letting his ego do the picking like it did back in his first term, he's going to let his brain and the people that are there do the picking with him. And it's not going to be trying to get this person in, getting that person in. They're going to get the best person, and people will see that is the best person, whether it's the agricultural secretary, whether it's the health person, it doesn't matter. They will make sure they get the right people at the right place.
Well, I totally agree with you because he has a reputation for attracting the best of the best. Take a look at who was stumping with him. But one of the most successful and still, I think, on and off it switches, the wealthiest man in the world and a genius mind of Elon Musk. He had him on the campaign trail. And I was listening to an interview with Trump and Tucker Carlson just before the election, and he said he's learned from 2016 who's smart, who's not, who's trustworthy, who's not. I think the second term is going to bode well with the experience. And I'll tell you one thing, if there was a president that had more obstacles to overcome, where more people were interested in his demise rather than his success, you know, he learned a lot out of that. And I think he's going to attract, like you say, good people. And that's what's going to make the difference. And I think I would agree with you. There's probably going to be a little less ego this time in it, because he knows he's attracting good people. So are the producers looking at it saying, okay, could be, maybe some version, maybe some of that, maybe some of this. But in the end, they think there's the potential to negotiate with Trump. But what's the concern for the producers on this side of the table, on the Canadian side of the table? I read that interview that you had with Gunther, and he listed some concerns there.
Yeah, yes, and absolutely. Number one, the tariff. You know, if we've got to deal with a 10% tariff on grain going in, what did he say? He said something about, not only will it affect the bottom line of farmers in Canada, but it's also going to affect the food price in the United States because we trade so much with the Americans. So that is a concern. But as we've already discussed, I think we'll be able to bring that concern down. And then, of course, costs. You know, like we get, all the farm machinery. You know, if the dollar keeps going up, it's a little, it just costs more money to do the kinds of things we want to do on the farm. So I think we have the concerns. I think the biggest concern that Gunther is, and if you read that part of it, he says we have to make sure we have the right people with the right minds and the right motives negotiating from Ottawa and to be ready for Trump when he comes, or whoever comes to go negotiate.
Exactly. So on our side of the fence, our side of the 49th, we have very imbecilic people that have been functioning in high capacity places that have responsibility, that have shown themselves to be anything less but capable. When we look at the fact that we have this duopoly on the railroad system, and that both railroads could be in a strike position at the same time, I think it speaks to the fact that Canada can be its own worst enemy in doing business with anyone in the world.
Well, as Gunther said, it doesn't look, like where are they? When we had these issues, where were the people that could have made the difference earlier instead of giving us all the hullabaloo and stuff? It's like, Sylvain Charlebois says, or somebody else made the comment, we're going to have to make sure that we're going to have people so we can get rid of some of this socialistic crap, so to speak, and start to deal with it. But, it's going to be interesting to see how will Justin Trudeau, handle some of these things. As one other person, as we've talked about it, this actually was the young farmer I was talking about. He says, Trump, the reaction by this farmer was, it'll be interesting to see how Trump can wipe the floor with Justin Trudeau. And,
Well, you know what? Let's liken this to a sports analogy. I know you played hockey. I played a little bit. I played more soccer than hockey. If you got to send somebody in there to lead the team and you want your top performer, I don't know if Justin Trudeau, Mr. Fancy Socks, cuts the mustard. I think the confidence of the Canadian people is at an all-time low to send in someone like Trump who has really no likability. He has no sense of gaining respect from world leaders.
Trudeau, you said Trump. You meant
I'm
Trudeau.
Sorry, Trudeau. Thank you. Of course, no, very much the opposite with Trump. But you got Trudeau, who has tried to endear himself to people, but has found himself alienating himself. I think Justin Trudeau is one of the least respected leaders in the world today. So God help us, and I seriously mean that. We need capable people to come in and make that presence at the table and take the respect that we need. You know, my experience with guys like Trump, that I don't have no experience with him, but power players, if you're in front of one, you have to earn your way at that table. You have to earn your way to the table. Isn't that right? Otherwise, they keep you at the kids' table.
I just as an aside, I remember going on with Charles Adler on a CJOB 1 hour program. And Charles, I was in the studio with him. And the first 10, 15 minutes, he came at me with both barrels. And he was a great broadcaster, but he had his biases just like I do as mine. But he kept going, and when he turned the mic off and went into a commercial break at 15 minutes into the show, he says, Harry, you're a professional. You know, I handled every one of them, didn't let them intimidate me, but I had to earn my keep. After that, we could tell the story, you know. And
that's exactly what I was talking about. You know, yeah. You've got to have what I often say, the courage of your convictions, Harry. I think you know what that means, that you truly know what you believe, why you believe it, and you're going to stand your ground. Because as we started to talk about, there is an imminent threat. At least it might be a veiled threat. It might be where Trump is asking more than he expects to get. That's a power move in negotiating. But I still believe, and this is where I think we could probably agree, he's still the businessman, and he wants to do a business as America doing business with the whole world. So it's going to be interesting.
The position that President-elect Trump is now in, he's the president of the most powerful country in the entire world. You know, if it was anybody else, you know, if he was in it to make brownie points, he's been there. He's done that. He now wants to make America great again. And here's one other aspect that we cannot forget. When that bullet almost killed him, Trump realized that there was, for sure, and he knew that before, but he recognized and gave God the credit for sparing him. And when he made his opening remarks, when accepting it, when he realized he would be the next president, he gave again God the glory for being there and sparing him. And the humility with which he has come on, I believe, is a sincere humility, because he doesn't need to convince anybody. He's been elected, a landslide. So now moving forward with all the people that are there praying for him and making sure that they do it the right way, that to me gives me another real great confidence in that they will do the right things. Will they do all the right things for us as Canadian farmers? Probably not. But at the same time, let's make sure we respect where he's coming from and not try to, you know, finagle our way into different things. And I have strong faith in the agricultural community in Canada that we will do the right things. And if we do the right things and come with sincerity, he will do the right things too. So I believe a little pain for long-term gain is really where we can put it at.
Well, yeah, you know, when he entered into the political scene, not being a politician, and he admits that I'm a politician, I'm a businessman, which I think was the impetus for people to say, hey, let's try a businessman instead of a politician, you know, but he opened up the North American Free Trade Agreement, which had been a sealed, done deal many years ago. But he did it because it was, in his estimate, and I guess it was truly bias, because countries negotiated with them, because ultimately, I think, in some way, everybody wants to potentially do business with the biggest economy in the world, correct?
Totally. That's exactly it,
so,
especially when it's right next door.
So he's coming at the table saying, I know you want to do business with me, but these terms have to be fair. And I think, you know, I believe in win-win situations. I think I followed Warren Buffett for a long time as he, you know, I read his book, his biography. He always believed that everybody could win, that there didn't need to be a winner and a loser, that both parties could win. And that's what his success was, that he always advocated that people could win. In a similar way, I think a business person knows can't get everything, but he can get most of what he wants and possibly everything he needs. Like the wants and the needs are different, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But just something else that Gunter, spoke to. I asked him the question, and that had to do with the Bill 282 that's in front of the Senate right now. The one that where if it passes as is, it protects supply management and any trade agreements we make with anybody else puts supply management aside. Mr. Trump is not a supply management person. So Gunter did say that as much as we love our dairy industry, as much as we appreciate the dairy farms, right now supply management may be a little bit rocky going forward because Trump will not negotiate with Canada if he has to put supply management to the side.
So hang on, you don't want to move past that too quickly. For our readers, you and I might understand supply management, but let's put it in the context of why it's not good, because clearly it's a concern, right? Can you just flesh that detail out a little bit more?
Supply management, we have it for dairy, we have it for poultry, chickens, eggs, and turkeys, and so we've got to, and it's there. It's a supply management. We have a quota system.
Are we talking about the quota system here, essentially?
Totally. It's a quota system, and it's a cost of production formula. Right now, the price of milk by the Canadian Dairy Commission has dropped 0.023 cents a liter. Why? Because the cost of feed grains has also come down a little bit. So now the cost of milk to the consumer drops a tiny bit. But at the same time, we've got a lot of good dairy people that are making lots of money. Not only that, and Gunter also said, they put a price on the quota. Initially, they weren't going to. Now they can take that quota and go to the bank. But at the same time, it keeps the cost of the price to the consumer a bit higher. And so it'll be interesting to see what will happen. Like we have, and they were going to have this system to keep so many of these producers in business. Well, it's dropped just like everybody else. It really hasn't done anything to keep dairy producers in. We have a great dairy industry. I'm not here to put it down, but it may need some revamping, and I'm not exactly sure. All I'm saying is, Mr. Trump is not going to take kindly when Canada starts to negotiate and say, oh, yeah, but Trump will say, but what about dairy? What about cheese? What about milk and so forth? We'll see what will happen.
Okay, so we got a little more than 9 minutes left here, and I want to touch on that because there's a fear of American dairy, particularly milk. You might have seen some posts people have put up. What is the reality of the American dairy products? Actually, what are the dairy products that are entering Canada right now?
We would have some yogurt, we would have some cheeses maybe, but not any milk. There's absolutely no milk that can come into, and that's the law. Like we cannot bring in any milk, any of these things from any country. We are a border unto ourselves when it comes to dairy products, chicken, and eggs. And so that's what keeps the price up. And so that's been the biggest challenge. Like on one hand, we have grain, we have pigs, we get cattle going back and forth. The border, there's no quota system, there's nothing. It's a straight business deal between packers, producers, whatever it may be. But dairy, milk, and cheese, and the specialty yogurts, it's really a come see, come saw kind of thing. You can bring in a bit, but not much.
Okay, so let's turn our attention for the remainder of our time to the big farm bill that has been stalled in the U.S. And I believe it's stalled in the Senate, which now, of course, flipped to red. So let's talk about that because that bill has been has been hijacked, I think, by the climate change people. Where do you see that going now? Because I think we know with America's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord, when Trump became president, the 45th president, I think we know where that's going to go. But what's the word on the street with the big farm bill that has just been stalled forever?
Well, the agricultural organizations, especially the National Pork Producers Council, they've been really pushing the government. Look, we need this, so they keep, continuing it temporarily. But there has been no redesign of a farm bill, and it's been, I think, a year and a half already. So, number one, it's climate change, yes, those kinds of things, water and so forth. And the other thing has to do with Proposition 12 in California, which means that you got to have so much more room for sows and so forth. It has to do, and so that in itself, like the animal activists, and not, they're the ones that have pushed, and so they want some things in this farm bill that's going to protect us going forward, so we can't all of a sudden have, there's a proposition that was, I don't think it made it to this election, but there was propositions that talked about making it illegal to kill any animal in a state if you're going to use it for food. And
okay, does that farm bill have any implications to Canada, I guess? Because we've talked about it in other programs. Are there any real implications to Canada that we should be concerned about?
Well, it gives stability, and it shows what is actually taking place. It gives protection to things going forth. And, when you put the farm bill in there and you say we want to keep moving hogs back and forth, that's what happens. But it's more specifically designed for the American producer, where it comes to different things. But we still watch it because it gives instability, and we weren't sure where would had the Harris administration or Harris become president, where would they take that farm bill? We had no idea.
Right. Okay. So what affects the American producers eventually has some kind of a spill down effect to Canadian producers when certain laws are implemented. We know the country of origin labeling is still in the process of happening. That obviously concerns us, particularly the hog industry. Talked about that. But overall, in the last 5 minutes, as a veteran ag reporter, talking to all those producers over all the years, if you had to pick a number between 1 and 10, 10 being extremely positive, where are the producers right now with the Trump administration?
I would say we would be about a 6.5, 6.5. People will say, see, we've heard so many negative things. Everything was so negative, from dictator to Hitler to you name it. And so that started to rub off, and not so much with the farming community, but social media and so forth. So now, we've had a chance, we were in Fargo, and Ange went downstairs to sit, and she listened to some of the people that the day before really hadn't said much. Once they realized that Trump was actually going to become president, all of a sudden they're saying, yay, that's good. Now we can speak out loud. Even this farmer that I talked to from Rivers today, he asked him, he kind of apologetically says, what's happening in the United States is probably going to be good for my business. And I said, yes, exactly. So, and he spotted something that he was positive. He wasn't sure what it was, but it was a positive thing. I would say, make it 6.5 to 7 as far as thinking positive about this.
Yeah. So, you know what? You just look at the last 4 years, and you're old enough, I'm old enough to remember Ronald Reagan when he campaigned the first time for the White House. He asked the people of America, he said, here's the question in terms of who are you going to vote for? Are you better off now, 5 years later, than you were 4 years as opposed to 4 years ago? The answer to that question clearly is going to indicate how you should vote. And in all sincerity, he said, would you give me a chance? Because he knew where America was. We saw 4 years of what Biden did, and it's it's got to be nothing less than a disaster. If you really encapsulate it, everything has gone that should be down, and everything that should have went forward seems to have gone backward. So I think overall, Harry, when we look at it, safe to say people are optimistic that something good is going to happen. Is that fair to say? The last 2 minutes are yours, Harry.
Well, I'll just repeat a little bit of some of the things. If you look at the representation across the country, that's a big thing. That's a real big thing. The aspect of faith. Where Trump has absolutely admitted that I'm not. I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for God Almighty. And so, and that's a step forward. On the other hand, business, business, and business. And that's what Trump loves to do. When I first saw him come on the scene, and this was 2013, I said, you know what, he's the guy. And people said, well, what are you talking about? Well, I just said to myself, if a guy can build 100-story buildings all over the world, it says he's got to be doing something right. Yes, there's a lot of personal things but you know what? His family is with him. They were standing there with him, working hard to get him reelected. So all of those things are pointing to a real positive. And you know what? It's business, and let's make sure we have the right people, the right attitude to move forward and negotiate. As my motto says, a positive mental attitude to encourage, serve, and inspire others will motivate you to do your best. And that's exactly the way I see Trump administration moving forward. And that Siemens says.
Well, as always, Harry, you said it absolutely perfectly. Thank you so much. We're probably going to revisit this in the weeks and months to come. Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we're going to be talking here at Farm to Market, and we're going to be seeing what differences he's making. But thank you so much for your insight, and time is a precious commodity. I thank you for sharing your time with us here tonight. God bless you. We'll see you here next week, Harry.
My privilege.
All right. Well, that was a great discussion with Harry Siemens of Siemens Says. Harry's opinion is sought all over the place. You can catch him on CJOB and all kinds of other places. But as we get ready to go into our next segment here of age-reversing health, we're going to be talking about the implications, again, spill-out effect of what's happening in the U.S. with this change of leadership and affecting our health industry.